Welcome to the deep dive. You've brought us some really fascinating and frankly, pretty critical sources this time.
Hmm.
They all seem to point towards this really difficult issue in the workplace. What these materials, well, they bluntly call asshole behavior.
Yeah, it's a strong term, but it captures something specific.
Right, and we probably all have an idea of what that looks like, on the surface. But our goal here isn't just that surface recognition.
No, absolutely not.
We're going to dig into these insights you shared, articles, excerpts on workplace dynamics, employee conduct, to really grasp the surprisingly deep and destructive impact this behavior has.
Yeah, not just on people individually, but on teams, even whole companies.
Exactly. So forget just complaining about it. We're after the core knowledge here. What are the often hidden costs, and maybe some real understanding of how to, tackle it?
Right. The mission really is to equip you, the listener, with actionable insights, stuff that goes beyond just frustration.
Things you can actually use.
Precisely. Because what seems like maybe just a personality clash or someone
Yeah.
being a bit tough, it can actually unravel the very fabric of an organization
So we're looking past the immediate annoyance.
to the systemic damage. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start by defining it. What do these sources actually mean by this asshole attitude?
Well, fundamentally, it boils down to a consistent disregard for others.
Mm.
Not just their opinions, but their feelings, too.
Which naturally leads to self-centered behavior.
Exactly. And it's crucial, like the sources point out, this isn't about just being assertive or, standing your ground.
No, it's different.
It's about actively undermining the team effort, dragging down productivity by basically devaluing other people's contributions, even their humanity.
And the sources seem to show how quickly that disregard just erodes teamwork.
Oh, incredibly quickly. These individuals, they get very good at justifying their own views
Right?
while just dismissing everyone else's. Doesn't matter how good the other ideas are.
This is an immediate roadblock to collaboration.
A huge one.
Yeah. And the impact on the wider workplace environment seems pretty stark in these readings.
Definitely. You see stress levels just shoot up.
Almost tangible, isn't it?
It is. And morale takes a nosedive.
Mm.
And then the bottom line impact you mentioned.
Higher turnover.
Yeah.
People leaving.
Yep. Makes total sense, right? Why stick around in a place where you constantly feel devalued?
It's like a basic psychological thing, isn't it? That constant negativity, it triggers a kind of threat response.
That's a great way to put it. It makes you want to escape, hence the turnover.
And it gets worse when it's leadership, right?
Mhm.
This asshole leadership the sources mentioned.
Oh, absolutely amplified. Dealing with a difficult colleague is one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's your boss, it breeds this deep, pervasive distrust.
Because why would you share a new idea?
Exactly. If you expect it'll just be shot down, or worse, maybe even used against you somehow.
You just shut down. It kills healthy communication.
Completely. The very channels an organization needs.
And that's where it gets really critical, isn't it? Because stifling communication has these major knock-on effects.
Huge effects. The sources talk about a loss of flexibility.
Makes sense. If people aren't sharing what they see.
The organization can't adapt to new challenges, market shifts, anything.
And creativity.
Forget it. Innovation, problem solving.
Yeah.
They just can't survive in that kind of closed-off environment.
It's like the organization's collective brain just gets locked up.
Yeah, and it ties back to that basic human need, to feel valued like you belong. If that's missing, the creative spark just fizzles.
Which really raises questions about the long-term cost, right?
Yeah.
You're basically stopping employees from reaching their potential.
Exactly. And the sources suggest it's not just individuals, it puts a cap on the whole organization's ability to grow and succeed.
And it's not just about shutting down new ideas, it's also how success is treated,
Ah, yes. That classic mentality the sources describe.
where they are solely responsible for any win, no recognition for the team.
None at all. And you can just imagine the resentment, the jealousy that breeds when someone constantly takes all the credit.
It totally undermines team goals, doesn't it? That whole spirit of collaboration.
Absolutely. When it's all about individual perception, individual gain,
Yeah.
team morale just tanks.
And the sources are clear that directly impacts performance.
Measurably so.
So as you're listening, maybe pause and think. Have you seen these dynamics, maybe experienced them? What really stood out to you from these first points?
And digging a bit deeper, the sources really hammer home how corrosive this is, specifically for teams.
Like a virus, you said.
Yeah, exactly. You see morale just plummet, performance drops off significantly.
Yeah, it sounds like it spreads easily, like it's contagious.
Alarmingly so. The sources show how this behavior, especially from leaders, managers, supervisors, it just cascades down.
Sets a new negative norm.
hmm And the foundations of cohesion, collaboration, they just start to crumble.
What's the mechanism there? The sources mention overconfidence.
Yeah, this sort of inflated confidence in their own opinions, leading to just dismissing everyone else's input.
Right.
And the sources stress this isn't just disagreement. It fundamentally breaks communication. It destroys trust.
Because why bother formulating a thoughtful point if you know it'll be ignored?
Precisely. It hits that need to be heard, to be respected. Deny that consistently, and people just disengage.
Which has that chilling effect on innovation we talked about.
Absolutely. Leaders who ignore other perspectives, they actively stifle diverse thinking, any real chance for creative solutions.
People just become passive, wait for orders.
Yep. And the organization loses all that proactive potential. It's directly counter to how effective teams work, where you need different views.
And trust just evaporates.
It's central. The sources show leaders diminishing others' contributions while puffing up their own. It creates such a toxic space.
Motivation must just dive.
Takes a nosedive. Why go the extra mile if it won't be acknowledged? And people even stop asking for help.
Really? Why?
They expect to be dismissed, maybe even criticized, for needing it in the first place.
Wow. And fairness goes out the window, too, it sounds like.
Completely. The sources talk about favoritism becoming common.
Right. Some people get the good projects, the praise.
While others are ignored, that's just a recipe for discontent, conflict.
And your best people start looking elsewhere.
Inevitably. The ones you really want to keep, they'll find somewhere they feel valued.
What about feedback? How does that work in this dynamic?
Poorly. Leaders with this attitude, they tend to reject any input that challenges them.
So they miss chances to grow or for the organization to improve.
Exactly. And when leaders show they can't take feedback, guess what? Team members stop giving it.
Leads to stagnation.
And in that kind of climate, nobody wants to admit mistakes, right?
No way. Fear of being torn down.
Right. So people hide errors, hide problems, which only lets them get bigger, more damaging down the line. It creates this fear where learning just can't happen.
Does this spill over? Affect relationships outside the company?
The sources suggest it can, with clients, partners. If that attitude comes across, trust erodes fast.
Which means lost business, damaged reputation.
Potentially, yes.
But the biggest long-term risk, the sources say, is pretty severe.
It's stark, yeah. The potential fragmentation, even collapse of the organization.
Because the basic respect, collaboration, empathy, it's gone.
It's like the glue devolves. And as we said, top talent leaves. The organization gets weaker from the inside out.
So thinking about your own team experiences, can you recall times you saw this kind of behavior just dismantle a team?
Now, let's shift to something maybe even more insidious. Those hidden costs.
Yeah.
Especially with toxic employees who might actually seem like high performers.
Ah, yes. This gets really tricky, doesn't it? Because they might look like stars on the surface.
Exactly. They hit their numbers, maybe. But the sources show a much darker reality underneath.
Like a decline in psychological safety.
Precisely. The sources describe how these individuals create this stifling atmosphere.
People get scared to speak up.
Scared to voice dissent, propose new ideas, even take necessary risks. All because they fear being criticized, humiliated, maybe even punished professionally.
Which obviously kills innovation and problem solving.
Directly impedes it. Psychological safety is that feeling that you can speak up, share, even fail without getting slammed for it.
Then you can almost feel the impact on the general mood, can't you?
Oh, yeah. The sources describe this constant undercurrent of stress. Morale tanks, engagement drops.
And then the costly turnover again, often the really good people who just can't stand the negativity.
Exactly. The ones who have options.
And these hidden costs, they go beyond just feelings, right? They affect actual work.
Definitely. The sources point out how the constant conflict, the friction these people cause, it actually slows down workflows, reduces productivity.
Even if it's not obvious on a spreadsheet.
Right. Think about favoritism, for example. If a toxic high performer shows blatant favoritism, the demotivation in the rest of the team, that hits their output.
It sounds like a kind of slow organizational decay.
That's a good way to put it. The sources explain how tolerating this behavior, especially from leaders or supposed stars, it damages the core culture, the values.
Because it sends a message that it's okay, maybe even rewarded.
And others might start copying it. Things like integrity, real collaboration, they just erode from within.
And this isn't just internal, is it? Can it harm external relationships too?
The sources say yes. If these toxic people interact with customers, partners, their abrasive style can jeopardize trust.
Leading to lost business again, damaged reputation.
Potentially major losses, yeah.
What about the people working with these individuals on the same team?
Their own growth can be stunted. The sources point out how this behavior creates an environment that kills development opportunities. It discourages skill building.
Leads to a negative career outlook for others.
Right. Which, again, feeds into that costly turnover cycle.
So looking at the big picture, these high-performing assholes, as the sources might call them, they actually carry huge, often unseen long-term costs.
Absolutely. Big negative impacts on productivity, culture, trust, and ultimately the business's sustainability.
Right.
It's a crucial point often missed when you only look at short-term individual numbers.
Okay, let's zero in now on specific behaviors. The real morale killers. The things that just suck the energy out of a workplace.
And the sources suggest these often come from leaders, surprisingly perhaps. Managers, supervisors.
Even well-intentioned actions can backfire.
That's a key insight. Public shaming is a prime example the sources highlight.
Where a boss criticizes someone in front of everyone.
Yeah, they might think they're setting an example, giving tough love.
Yeah.
But the long-term damage to confidence, to team dynamics, it can be huge and widespread.
You can just imagine the fear it creates in everyone else watching.
Totally. It creates this climate of anxiety. If it happened to them, it could happen to me.
And that just eats away at trust and leadership, any sense of safety.
Absolutely. Another morale killer the sources mention, needless meetings or piling on admin tasks.
Things bosses do to make their lives easier, maybe.
Often, yeah. To feel more in control, perhaps.
Yeah.
But it burdens the team, pulls them from core work.
And motivation just drains away.
Exactly. And underlying a lot of this, it seems, is often just a lack of empathy.
Leaders who just don't get the stress their team is under.
Or don't seem to want to get it. The sources describe these insensitive supervisors. Leads to misunderstandings, frustration, just a stagnant, unsupportive feel.
The sources even mention psychopathic traits in some extreme cases.
They do. A real lack of empathy, laser-focused on self-interest, often at the team's expense.
The impact must be devastating.
Huge mental fatigue, stress, morale hitting rock bottom for people working under them.
And predictably, your best talent heads for the door.
They do. High performers won't stand that. It creates that vicious cycle again. You lose good people, the environment gets worse.
So the contrast is clear. Leaders need to reflect.
Critically important. Reflect on their behavior, cultivate real empathy, give supportive feedback. That's what lifts morale, the sources say. That's what builds a thriving workplace.
Now, let's tackle that paradox. The high performer who's also, well, difficult. An asshole, to use the source's term.
Right. They hit their targets, deliver results, but their behavior is toxic.
The sources argue this is like a cancer in the organization.
Yeah, that's the analogy they use. Because even with good individual results, the overall effect is damaging.
Like someone who criticizes others publicly to look competent.
Exactly. Might seem effective short-term, maybe they get a project done, but team members withdraw. Creativity stops. Discussion dies. The long-term damage is significant.
And the biggest risk here is that erosion of trust again.
Definitely. Between leaders and teams. When someone constantly undermines others, communication just breaks down. Guardedness sets in. Performance eventually suffers.
The sources use a sports analogy, like Messi needing his team.
Yeah, it's a great illustration. Individual brilliance isn't enough. You need teamwork, collaboration, lifting others up. That guarantees long-term success, not just individual stats.
It really hammers home that skills aren't everything. Attitude, integrity matter just as much.
Crucially important, the sources argue. You can have the most skilled person, but if their behavior demoralizes everyone, the net effect is negative, often deeply negative.
And we see those hidden costs again. Turnover, low morale, business performance suffering.
It all connects.
It sounds like their behavior just makes the environment tense and restrictive for everyone else.
Very much so. Increases stress. People are afraid to speak freely. The whole organization becomes risk-averse, misses opportunities.
And if these individuals get promoted?
That's when it gets really dangerous, according to the sources. It signals that this behavior is acceptable, maybe even desirable.
Fosters a cutthroat culture.
Yeah, competitiveness over collaboration. Self-interest rules. It threatens long-term survival and drives out other good people.
So the clear takeaway, judging people only on performance metrics is risky.
Hugely risky. Attitude, cooperation, integrity, these are vital for organizational health, the sources strongly suggest.
Okay, let's focus specifically on trust within a team. How is it destroyed? It seems so fundamental.
Absolutely essential. The sources say it's non-negotiable for success.
And prioritizing yourself over the team is a major trust killer.
A huge one. When people are only looking out for number one, the basis for trust, for open communication, just disappears.
Like someone inflating their own contribution while downplaying others.
That's a classic example the sources give. Breeds immediate resentment, unfairness. People feel unseen, unvalued. Collaboration breaks down right there.
And those public takedowns we mentioned.
Another massive trust destroyer. Criticizing people openly, whether leader to subordinate or even peer-to-peer. It creates fear.
People focus on protecting themselves, not supporting each other.
Exactly. Self-preservation kicks in, blocks healthy communication, stops effective problem solving.
What about leaders who prioritize their own gain over the team's growth?
Hugely damaging. Leaders set the tone. If their actions scream, "me first," the team feels devalued, demotivated. Communication fractures.
And it's hard to trust when things feel unfair, isn't it?
Impossible. The sources talk about biased treatment, unfair evaluations. If some people always get favored while others are ignored, trust dies. Cooperation becomes impossible.
And selfish behavior leads people to withdraw.
Yeah, people pull back. Less sharing of opinions, reluctance to raise issues, problems fester because information isn't flowing. That lack of trust permeates everything, drags down performance.
And the long-term hits are big.
Substantial. Lost growth opportunities, people not using their full skills, talented folks leaving.
Because the environment is just too distrustful.
Exactly. So trust isn't just a nice to have. It impacts efficiency, results, long-term health. Damaging it might look like a shortcut sometimes, but it compromises the entire organization.
Let's explore that negative chain reaction the sources talk about, how this attitude can spread like wildfire through an organization.
Right. It's not isolated incidents. It creates this snowball effect.
Start small, maybe, like dismissing ideas.
Often, yeah. Seems minor, but it stifles communication. People stop sharing. Innovation slows down. Problem solving gets harder. The whole mindset becomes more conservative, risk-averse.
And that lack of empathy we keep coming back to manifests as public criticism, perhaps?
For example. And that doesn't just hurt the target. It erodes trust in leadership across the board. Hits morale hard, damages psychological safety for everyone.
And it infects things like performance reviews, feedback.
Definitely. Leaders with this attitude often fail to recognize others' contributions fairly. Creates feelings of unfairness. Increases the risk of losing good people who feel unseen.
And the focus shifts from teamwork to just individual wins.
That me-first attitude takes over. The cooperative framework breaks down. Self-interest becomes the main driver, not collective goals.
Which sounds like a recipe for conflict.
Absolutely. It breeds tension, friction. People become competitive against each other, not collaborative with each other. Leads to internal splits, less effectiveness overall.
And the scary part is this can get baked into the culture itself.
That's the real danger, according to the sources. New hires see it, learn it, mimic it. The negative cycle continues, and it makes it harder to attract good talent in the first place.
So how do you break this chain? Leadership seems key.
Crucial. Leaders have to model humility, empathy, show respect, be open to feedback themselves. And they need fair evaluation systems that reward collaboration, not just individual stats.
And just modeling isn't enough. You need feedback mechanisms, training.
Yes. Proactive feedback, maybe targeted training to address the behavior directly. If you let it slide, the impact is just too far-reaching, too damaging long-term.
So this negative chain reaction is pervasive.
It really is. It undermines the organization's ability to thrive. Nurturing that culture of humility, mutual respect. That's the antidote, the sources argue.
Okay, let's focus on those individuals who always seem to be stirring the pot, the ones creating discord, dragging down the atmosphere.
Ah, yes. The sources have some keen observations about them.
The key trait seems to be avoiding responsibility, always blaming others.
Yes, a strong tendency towards that. Masters of blame shifting, even when they're clearly the cause. And that, predictably, destroys trust within teams and across the organization.
And often they don't even realize the impact they're having.
Frequently, no. The sources suggest it stems from intense self-centeredness. They're so focused on their own perspective, their needs, their contributions, they just don't see or maybe ignore the negative effects on others.
And they can be quite manipulative with power dynamics.
Very adept, often. They can look good to superiors, especially those focused only on short-term results.
Right.
While skillfully shifting blame downwards when things go wrong, makes it hard to address the root behavior.
It's like they actively create divisions.
Sometimes, yes. Inciting competition, forming cliques, it hinders real collaboration, lowers efficiency.
And they can be good at hiding it, appearing supportive while being the problem.
Surprisingly skilled at concealment, the sources say. Might even step up in crises, looking like leaders, while their underlying attitude is the real issue. It's subtle sabotage.
And they downplay other successes to protect themselves.
Often, yes,
Ah.
to maintain their own perceived competence, which is incredibly demotivating for those whose work is being minimized.
So their repeated actions create this constant atmosphere of mistrust, anxiety.
Pervasive unease, yeah. People get guarded, innovation gets stifled, growth is hindered.
So early identification is key.
Crucial. Plus, timely feedback, challenging as it is, and fair evaluation systems that can uncover the true negative impact these individuals have.
Okay, let's broaden out again. Why does motivation decline in the workplace? It seems complex.
Very multifaceted, yes. The sources point to a whole range of factors.
A big one seems to be unfairness, lack of recognition, biased reviews.
Absolutely. That sense of inequity really hits morale hard, diminishes the drive to perform.
Management style matters too, top-down approaches.
Huge impact. If employee input isn't valued, if autonomy is stifled, creativity shuts down, motivation drops.
What about goals? Unclear or unrealistic ones?
Also demotivating. If people don't know what they're aiming for or feel the target is impossible, they lose direction, lose drive.
Communication or lack thereof seems critical too.
Very much so. Poor communication from leaders creates uncertainty, anxiety. Bad info sharing within teams dampens morale, hinders collaboration. Both kill motivation.
People need to see a future, right? Growth opportunities, career paths.
Essential for long-term commitment. Without clear paths for growth or skill development, people are less likely to stay engaged.
And just workplace relationships themselves, conflicts, bullying.
Big factor. Conflicts, bad leader relationships. They're major distractions, major demotivators.
And work-life balance, or the lack of it.
Increasingly critical. Constant stress, burnout. That naturally kills intrinsic motivation for the work itself.
Finally, the big picture. Organizational vision, values.
Yeah, if employees don't connect with the why the organization's purpose, its values, it's hard to find meaning in the day-to-day. Lack of purpose equals lower motivation.
So rarely just one thing. It's usually a mix.
Almost always. A complex interplay of culture, leadership, the work environment itself, the sources suggest.
Let's dive into how asshole leadership specifically creates that culture of fear and mistrust.
Right, a really toxic combination.
The sources say excessive pressure might get short-term results.
Sometimes, maybe, but it's unsustainable. And the long-term damage to morale, to well-being, is significant. It's very short-sighted.
And the danger is that leaders see those short-term wins and think the bad methods are working.
That's a key concern the sources raise. Short successes can mistakenly reinforce abusive approaches in the leader's mind, making them double down.
But the real casualty is trust.
Always. Fear shreds trust, not just between leader and employee, but peer-to-peer too. Self-preservation takes over. Collaboration dies.
And the human cost? Health impacts.
Serious effects. Burnout, lower confidence, reduced motivation. It takes a real physical and mental toll on people.
So the contrast is clear. True leadership isn't about fear.
No, it's about creating an environment where people can perform naturally through sustainable systems, clear processes, trust, building a solid foundation, not forcing immediate brittle results.
Real growth relies on structure and systems, not coercion.
Exactly. Sustainable success comes from empowering people, not intimidating them.
So outstanding leaders build on trust, not fear.
That's the core message. Fear erodes trust and stops people from reaching their potential. It's ultimately self-defeating for the organization.
How does this overbearing attitude kill creativity specifically? That seems like a direct hit.
A huge one. Creativity needs freedom. Freedom to think, to experiment, to take risks.
But oppressive attitudes like public shaming crush that freedom.
Completely. Leads to lower productivity, less innovation.
Psychological safety comes up again here.
Absolutely crucial for creativity. If you fear failure, fear criticism, you won't put forward novel ideas. The risk feels too high.
And those public reprimands, even if ego-driven, affect everyone.
Witnesses feel the chill too. Leads to distrust, communication breakdown across the team.
The sources mention long-lasting trauma from public humiliation.
It can be genuinely traumatic professionally. Sticks with people, impacts confidence, future risk-taking.
So it really boils down to how leaders treat people.
Fundamentally. Effective leaders, especially for innovation, see mistakes as learning opportunities, necessary steps.
Whereas leaders who use public shaming create that toxic culture.
Yeah, high pressure, fear-driven, creativity just gets suffocated in that kind of environment.
So fostering creativity needs empathy, open dialogue, tolerance for failure.
Exactly. Leaders who promote safety and view mistakes as part of the process unlock creativity.
Okay, let's step back and look at destructive leadership overall, how the sources define it versus real leadership.
Right. True leadership builds up. This stuff tears down from within.
Defined by being self-centered, authoritarian, rejecting feedback.
Yes, that core approach, believing they know best, stifling employee autonomy, crushing creativity, very top-down.
Relying on fear, public shaming.
Those common tactics might get short-term compliance, but kills morale, innovation long-term.
And driven by self-preservation, blaming others, taking credit.
That pattern, again, destroys trust, makes collaboration impossible.
Distorts communication, impedes problem-solving.
People become afraid to speak honestly. Critical issues don't get addressed.
Unable to admit mistakes, leading to hidden problems.
Yeah, fostering that culture of concealment instead of learning.
And the biggest consequence is eroding the entire organizational culture.
Replacing collaboration with self-preservation and competition, undermining the organization's very fabric.
So allowing this really hinders long-term growth, increases turnover, risks losing competitiveness.
Serious consequences across the board.
So organizations need to recognize it, provide feedback, foster transparency, reward healthy leadership.
Absolute critical steps to counter this destructive pattern.
How does this attitude actually spread through an organization? Become pervasive?
It's insidious. It can really permeate the culture.
Starts with those self-centered decisions, disregarding opinions.
Often disrupts collaboration, stifles open discussion, innovation. Valuable insights get lost.
And workplace relationships suffer. Personal gain prioritized over teamwork.
Yeah, leads to resentment, conflict, breaks down genuine teamwork.
Excessive pressure, zero tolerance for mistakes, leading to hiding errors.
Creates that fear-based environment where people won't admit problems or take risks. Hinders learning, innovation.
So the whole culture gets tainted. Lack of empathy becomes normal. Self-interest dominates.
Exactly. It becomes the accepted way to operate.
Stifles opinions, risk-taking, making the organization less adaptable.
Yep. Becomes rigid, less able to respond to market changes, loses agility.
And negative impact on external relationships too. Clients, partners.
Can definitely damage trust externally, leading to lost opportunities.
Increases turnover as good people leave for better environments.
Consistently, talented people won't stay in that kind of culture.
So it really hinders sustainable growth, risks organizational breakdown.
It's a major impediment, yes. Can lead to serious decline if unchecked.
So leaders need to ditch the selfish attitudes. Prioritize respect, collaboration.
That's the fundamental shift required, the sources argue. It has to be modeled and expected from the top down.
Okay, let's get really practical. You're working for an asshole boss. What do the sources advise?
Some very concrete strategies, actually.
First step, stay calm, observe.
Crucial. Don't react emotionally. Step back. Observe objectively. Try to understand their patterns, maybe even their values, however warped. Understanding is a starting point.
And still seek feedback. Offer constructive points carefully.
Yes. Seek feedback on your work and tactfully offer perspectives on their behavior's impact. Frame it constructively. Avoid triggering defensiveness.
Self-preservation is key too. Meet expectations, but protect yourself.
Absolutely. Do your job well, but maintain your own boundaries, ideas, responsibilities. Don't let them unduly burden or diminish you. It's a balancing act.
What about a direct conversation?
Maybe one-on-one, the sources suggest. But frame it as suggestions for improvement, maybe for the team's benefit, not personal criticism. Focus on the collective good.
If it's public criticism, seek support from colleagues.
Good idea. Sometimes a collective approach, highlighting the impact on team morale or productivity, can be more effective than going it alone. Strengthen numbers.
And prioritize self-care. Avoid burnout.
Paramount. Maintain work-life balance. Use stress management. You need to protect your own well-being in these situations.
What if it's really bad, affecting the whole organization? Consider HR or other leaders.
If direct approaches fail and the impact is significant, yes, but go prepared. Back up concerns with specific facts, data. Make it objective.
So the overall advice, be strategic, not emotional. Protect yourself, but work towards improvement.
Exactly. Protect your career, your well-being, while trying to nudge things towards a better environment, even incrementally.
Okay, how do we spot this behavior early? What are the warning signs? The sources give a checklist.
Yeah, some clear red flags to watch for.
Ignoring or dismissing others' opinions consistently.
Big one. Acting like their view is the only one that matters.
Overemphasizing personal wins. Downplaying others' contributions.
Classic sign. Constant self-promotion at others' expense.
Hypercritical attitudes. Public put-downs.
Clear toxic behavior. Finding fault. Shaming others.
Refusing feedback. Getting defensive.
Strong indicator. Can't handle constructive input.
Dictatorial decision-making. No consultation.
Yep. Imposing choices without involving affected parties.
Compromised trust. Difficulty collaborating in their teams.
You'll see people hesitant to work openly together.
Slow problem-solving due to blame shifting.
Issues linger because no one takes ownership.
Negative impact on morale, culture, suppressed creativity,
Palpable unhappiness, lack of innovation in their vicinity.
and increased employee turnover around them.
A very tangible sign people are fleeing the behavior.
So recognizing these signs early is crucial.
Absolutely. For preserving a healthy environment and promoting sustainable growth.
Taking a step back again, the sources touch on broader stress factors, right? Beyond just workplace behavior.
Yeah, factors in work and life that elevate stress lead to health issues.
Like excessive workloads, constant pressure.
Major contributors lead to physical, mental fatigue, various health problems, heart issues, digestion, sleep loss.
Relationship problems, both at work and home.
Definitely. Conflicts with supervisors, competition, plus family responsibilities add to the load.
What about information overload? Internet, social media?
Pervasive factor now. Leads to anxiety, sometimes decreased self-worth.
Environmental factors. Uncomfortable offices. Lack of nature.
Subtly add stress. Yeah. Physical discomfort, not enough green time.
Job uncertainty. Career worries. Financial stress.
Big sources of anxiety for many in today's climate.
And lack of self-care. Poor diet, no exercise, unhealthy coping.
Exacerbates everything. Makes us less resilient to stress.
So persistent stress from many sources can lead to serious health issues.
Undeniably. Makes stress management and prioritizing well-being absolutely vital.
Let's connect this directly back to turnover. How asshole dynamics drive people away.
The sources draw a very clear line there.
Employees feeling undervalued if the company doesn't see them as assets.
Fundamental point. Lack of recognition, respect, major drivers of turnover, often stemming from this leadership style.
Excessive punishment for mistakes, especially in owner-driven firms.
Creates undue pressure, anxiety. Pushes good people out towards more supportive places.
Unfair expectations. Salary cuts or dismissals based on them.
Seen as deeply unfair, kills motivation, makes people leave.
Overemphasis on just results, neglecting effort and growth.
Fosters risk aversion, stifles innovation. People leave to find places that value their development.
And this leadership erodes team cohesion, increases competition, leads to favoritism.
All contribute to lower morale, driving turnover as people seek healthier team dynamics.
And that dismissive, we can just hire new people attitude.
Shows a real devaluing of human capital. Very damaging, very costly long-term.
So these conditions create a cycle of talent loss, labor shortages.
Necessitates a hard look at leadership practices, employee well-being, culture.
And the impact isn't just turnover costs, it's morale, productivity, competitiveness.
Far-reaching consequences beyond just replacing people.
Why do some cultures tolerate this behavior? It seems counterproductive.
It's complex, often several factors intertwined.
Like a results-at-all-costs culture, short-term focus.
Big one. If the numbers look good short-term, bad behavior gets overlooked.
Problematic leadership at the top setting the tone.
If leaders model it, it becomes normalized, hard to challenge lower down.
Highly competitive environments where putting others down seems like a strategy.
They can inadvertently reward the behavior, yeah.
Flawed reward systems, only measuring quantifiable outcomes, ignoring behavior.
Fails to disincentivize the negative actions. What gets measured gets done, and what gets rewarded gets repeated.
Organizational structure. Top-down models where challenging bosses is hard.
Authoritarian structures can shield bad behavior.
Historical or cultural factors. Normalizing hierarchy.
Some industries or company histories might make it more accepted.
Lack of a feedback culture. Toxic behavior isn't addressed.
If there's no accountability for interpersonal actions, it persists.
Organizations resistant to change. Prioritizing status quo over fixing dysfunction.
Might avoid tackling it for fear of disruption.
So tolerance stems from many intertwined factors, leading to bad outcomes.
Exactly. And those negative consequences, morale, turnover, productivity, growth necessitate a real reevaluation of leadership and culture.
What about the structures themselves that create unhealthy environments? Systemic issues,
Right, the systems that enable or even encourage bad dynamics.
like excessive workload and pressure leading to burnout.
Chronic overwork is a structural problem causing stress, health issues.
Lack of communication, closed decision-making, devaluing employees.
Structural communication flaws breed misunderstanding, resentment.
Authoritarian or condescending leadership styles being tolerated or promoted.
A structural issue if the system allows or rewards it, stifles expression, increases tension.
Flaws in evaluation systems, overemphasizing outcomes, overlooking teamwork. Unfair assessments.
If the system incentivizes the wrong things or is biased, it contributes.
Negative physical environments, open offices, noise, bad lighting.
Can add significant stress and discomfort structurally.
And the consequences are employee health issues, turnover, lower productivity, damaged reputation.
All flow from these unhealthy structural conditions.
So the fix requires structural reforms. Better leadership, communication, fair evaluations, workload management, better physical spaces.
Yes, tackling the underlying system issues is key.
Okay, finally, let's talk solutions. How do you build a culture that doesn't tolerate this, that actively rejects it?
Some clear, actionable steps organizations can take.
Establish transparent communication first, where everyone feels safe to speak.
Foundational. Open channels, psychological safety are key.
Implement fair evaluation systems, valuing teamwork alongside results.
Crucial. Reward collaboration and ethical conduct, not just numbers.
Promote humble, empathetic leadership. Leaders open to feedback.
Set the right example from the top. Inspire continuous improvement.
Address bad behavior swiftly and appropriately. Feedback, discipline.
Don't let it slide. Clear consequences reinforce values.
Clearly define and practice organizational values. Respect, collaboration, integrity.
Make them real, not just posters. Lived values shape culture.
Enhance psychological safety. Safe to voice opinions, learn from mistakes.
Absolutely vital for trust, innovation, and challenging bad behavior.
Provide ongoing training for leaders. Avoiding self-centeredness, improving communication.
Continuous development helps reinforce positive leadership.
So these elements work together to foster a healthy, respectful, supportive workplace, minimizing arrogance.
Exactly. It's a synergistic approach for sustained positive culture and success.
Last big question. Can this asshole behavior actually be corrected? Can people change?
Possible. Yes. Easy. Definitely not. The sources are realistic here.
Often deeply rooted, reinforced by power dynamics, past experiences.
Not just personality, but learned patterns, often enabled by the system.
So the first step is self-awareness, recognizing their own behavior and impact.
Absolutely critical. Without that recognition, change is almost impossible.
And feedback needs to be careful. Specific, factual, encouraging reflection.
Yes, delivered skillfully to minimize defensiveness and highlight concrete consequences.
Self-awareness can be fostered through coaching, introspection.
Yes, structured support can help cultivate it.
Developing humility is necessary. Respecting others, recognizing limitations.
A core part of the shift, moving away from egocentricity.
And organizational support matters. Consistent feedback, a culture valuing cooperation.
Essential reinforcement. The environment needs to support the change.
But deeply ingrained behavior, especially in successful people, is resistant.
Very much so. Success can unfortunately reinforce the negative patterns in their mind. Takes sustained effort.
Might need bigger intervention sometimes. Culture shifts, external help.
In tough cases, yes. Broader organizational change might be needed.
Could there be underlying causes? Insecurity, need for counseling.
Sometimes. Arrogance can be a defense mechanism. Professional support might help if the person is willing.
So correction requires self-awareness, organizational support, focus on humility and cooperation.
That's the complex recipe, yes. Challenging, but possible, with commitment from both the individual and the organization. So, wrapping up our deep dive today, it's really clear, isn't it, what your source is called asshole behavior. It's way more than just annoying.
Yeah, it's a genuinely destructive force. Impacts individuals, teams, culture, the bottom line.
And we unpack those hidden costs,
Yeah.
even from apparent high performers. The long-term damage to morale, trust, talent retention. It's huge.
It's really devastating sometimes.
So maybe a final thought for you listening. Think about the cultures you're in, work, maybe elsewhere. Where might these dynamics be playing out subtly or not so subtly?
Mm-hmm.
And based on what we've dug into from your sources, what role could you play in fostering more respect, more collaboration? Maybe it inspires you to look into building positive cultures or better feedback strategies.
Lots to think about there. Thank you for sharing these really insightful sources and for taking this deep dive with us to get a much richer understanding of such a critical workplace issue.